But I'm not huge. I mean, we do the YouTube, but the fact that I called it the YouTube means that I'm really not that hip to it. So, welcome, nerds, to another episode of the Nerds You're Looking For podcast, a weekly nerd culture podcast that discusses the culture through various segments. My name, of course, is Patrick Kuhn, alongside my co-host, as always, that Tyler Hunt. How's it going, man?
Doing pretty well, man. How are you?
A little tired. We ended up going over to your house last night and playing some board games, but yeah. I had been up since like 5:30 because I work on Saturdays now, and so it was a lot of fun, but we didn't end up leaving your place until like midnight. And so by the time we got home and kind of got ready for bed, it was closing in on like 21 hours I had been awake. Yeah. So it was a little shaky drive home.
No, that's tough for sure. It was fun though. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, for sure. We kind of saved my game for last, and I think that probably should have been the game that we played first because it was the one that takes the longest, and it takes a little bit more of like paying attention, and I think we were all kind of tired towards the end of it.
Yeah, I think you talked about that game as
Betrayal on the House of the Hill.
Yeah, I don't know. I wish I would have prepped for it. I learned the best we talked about this last night, watching YouTube videos and like watching others play it. If you hand me instructions, I just it doesn't connect the dots for me as well.
Sure.
So I wish that had been something I had looked into before you guys came over, because I figured we'd be playing it, but instead we kind of muddled through it, and it took a while.
Yeah, it usually doesn't take that long, because I was trying to explain to you guys last night, and for those that have played the game, like the first part of it isn't always the most fun. It's really the haunt, but you want to make the first part last as long as you can, because that helps you. If you end up being one of the heroes, it helps you defeat the traitor. If you have more rooms and you can kind of move around and stay away from them as much as you can. So it was good that we kept that first part going as long as we did, but considering that we were all kind of tired, by the time we got to the real fun part, the haunt, we were all kind of just, like, this could be over. Even I love that game a lot, and even I was just like, ugh. And it also I felt like we had already got, as far as me and my wife is concerned, we had struggled through the first couple of games when we first got the game, and it was like, I was really excited to play it again, but then I forgot, obviously, that you guys have never played it, and so it was just a lot of me explaining it, because there's a ton to explain, and I was just like, I just want to play the game.
Yeah.
But I mean, obviously not your guys' fault. You've never played the game, but it was just like, I was really excited to play it again, and it was just like, oh, this is just a playthrough kind of like tutorial, and then we never got to the real round.
Yeah.
But a lot of that game, like I was telling you guys after we were done, it's kind of confusing because they'll use different words in the instructions than they'll actually be in, like, on the game pieces. And so sometimes you kind of have to make judgment calls, and you kind of have to agree as a group that's playing the game, we're going to play it like this. So there's a lot of that in the game. And I know that when I first got it, I was home with my family. So we had played it like 4 or 5 times, and we just kind of established this is what we're going to do in this particular situation every time. Mm-hmm. And so it kind of helps when you have that group of people that you've played the game with a couple of times. It definitely helps a lot. Like, we had a lot of fun. I mean, I had a lot of fun last night as well, but especially playing that werewolf game was pretty fun. I like that quite a lot.
Yeah, the werewolf game, One Night Ultimate Werewolf, is pretty simple, which was nice. And then I think the one thing with that game, though, is I bet that it's a lot more fun with more people. Like, yeah. I've watched YouTube videos of people playing it, and a lot of them play with like 6 or 7 people. Yeah. And it gets really intricate as far as who's what and who's lying and that kind of stuff. Whereas when you have 4 people, it's pretty easy to nail down what happened and if somebody's lying or not.
Yeah, and I could not remember what each person was supposed to do. So it's like when it got to the lying part, I wasn't the best at that part because I was like, oh, well, I was a drunk. Well, what did you do? I was like, I don't know. Like, because I don't remember what he can do.
Yeah.
So it was kind of tough for me to lie. So I just ended up just telling the truth the entire time, which doesn't really make for much fun in the game.
Yeah. So I have like a love-hate relationship with board games, like what we were playing last night. If there's a game that's open to interpretation in certain things, I dislike it.
Okay.
And not necessarily dislike the game, but it gets annoying when you have to like go to Reddit to see what people say about if this thing happens. And that's kind of going back to like Betrayal on House of the Hill. Or
there's a lot of that.
Marvel Legendary is another game that I think I talked about a few episodes ago and that I've really liked. But it's like, oh, what happens if this happens and this happens? Oh, we'll go see what people on Reddit say. And there's no consensus. It's just kind of like what people assume. And I feel like if you've built a game that has those kind of intricacies, that you didn't really build a solid game. Where
exactly.
But I guess those games are so big too. You can't put absolutely every little thing in the instruction manual. So I don't know. It's a lose-lose.
Yeah, I definitely did exactly what you said going on to YouTube and Reddit and stuff like that when I first got Betrayal on the House of the Hill, because there's so much of that. And it's just like, I read somewhat frequently, I guess. I'm more into audiobooks now just because of my time. I just can't sit down and read an actual book. I'm a decent reader, so it's not about that. But when you open an instructional manual for a board game, it's just like I get through the first couple of sentences, I'm like, fuck this. Like, we'll just figure it out. Because it's just, I don't know, something about that. I can't read it, especially with that particular game. There's so many little things in it. And so I basically read like the first page and I was like, well, fuck this. And I just went on YouTube, and I would much rather listen to somebody. It's the same stuff.
Yeah.
It's just listening to somebody to like explain it with the pieces and stuff. Yeah. That's just the way my mind works. And so I had to do exactly that. I watched like 4 or 5 videos before we even played the game, so I could kind of explain how to play it. But even then, it was kind of trial and error the first couple of times. So I'd definitely be interested in playing it again with you guys, because I think if we're a little bit more energetic, I think that would definitely help. Especially, it's one of those games, like, if you can get a couple of people like really into like the horror aspect of it, it's really, really fun.
No, I liked it a lot. I just need to learn more about it, because there's things in the game that we didn't even come across that I was kind of reading about in the Haunt manual, because I was the Haunt and the trader, and I was like, I have no idea what it's saying with like monsters. And at one point I got a dog, and I never did anything with the dog the rest of the game, and I'm sure I could have used it to my advantage. So there's a lot of little things that I need to kind of research before playing again. Yeah,
we never got a ton of items either. That's a big part of the game, and I was really surprised that we just never came across a lot of that.
Yeah, because my trader card said that somebody could attack me with the ring if they had the ring, and that would hurt me.
I think that was actually an omen, because you can get omens have items too.
Well, either way, nobody ever had the ring.
Yeah.
And I dispatched you guys pretty quickly, but I don't know that I even did it right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I want to learn more about it, because it was a lot of fun.
For sure. All right. So if this is your first episode, we normally don't talk about board games for 5-10 minutes. We usually start off each episode by kind of just checking in with each other. We don't get to have the nerdy conversations we used to when we were growing up. So we kind of use this first segment as an excuse to do just that. We call it What We're Into. So what are you into this week?
I'm into a newer Netflix show. And not the good one that everybody's talking about right now.
All right.
I haven't watched that yet, but I'm looking forward to it. And that one is, I believe, is Ozark. I'm going to talk about Friends from College.
Okay.
Which came out July 14th.
I was very intrigued with this show, but then it did not get very good reviews.
So you haven't watched it?
No, I have not.
I was very intrigued by this show as well, because there is a ton of talent involved with it. I mean, it stars Keegan-Michael Key, Kobe Smulders, Nat Faxon, who was on that show Married that I thought was okay. Yeah, but he seems to be a pretty funny guy. Fred Savage, Billy Eichner's in it a few episodes. What's her face from Saturday Night Live that was in Ghostbusters? Kate McKinnon. She's in an episode or two. So a lot of great actors, and then kind of the mind behind it was Nicholas Stoller, who I really like. He put together Forgetting Sarah Marshall, and he did the Neighbors movies and some other stuff. And he seems to be like a really great comedic director. So lots of talent involved. I thought, like, even seeing the poor reviews, I was like, I got to give this a try because there's just too many people in it for it to not be good. But it was not good.
Okay.
And
that's what I've heard.
So essentially it's about the lives of a group of friends that are long removed from college, or like going into their 40s. They all went to Harvard, and I thought that this would kind of speak to me. I mean, they're getting older. They're balancing their adult responsibilities with the nostalgia they have for the past and these friendships. And I thought that's something that, we're kind of going through now.
And we also both went to Harvard.
Yeah, exactly. So, this stage of our life, something that we can relate to. The problem is it takes a turn with the characters right from the get-go in the first episode. And it's essentially an 8-episode season about really, really terrible people. Like, these people are supposed to be friends, but they're just awful to each other. I thought the main themes in the show would be like what I said, balancing getting older and nostalgia. Instead, the main theme of the show, in my opinion, is adultery, as well as lying to protect yourself from everybody that you care about. So it's really a shame because the show is actually pretty funny in parts. And you can tell that Nicholas Stoller is really great with that humorous storytelling, and he hasn't lost that knack. It's just hard to care about any of the characters because they're all making terrible decisions for 8 episodes that would hurt the people they claim to love within their friend group. Like I said, tons of adultery, tons of cheating. I mean, overall, it's 8 30-minute episodes, so it's not unwatchable. It's a quick watch. There's still funny moments in it. So I don't necessarily say, like, I absolutely do not recommend this show. It's awful, because there were parts that made me laugh. But I need the characters to be characters that I can connect with for me to really enjoy it. And I just couldn't, because they're all so terrible. And I just couldn't find that level of enjoyment with the show.
Yeah, I think I was drawn to this show mostly because of the cast. It looked really, really interesting. And for a lot of the things that you thought it was going to be, because I saw it and I immediately thought, okay, yeah, that's going to be a really good show because of all the things that you said that you thought it was going to be as well. So we kind of had the same reaction. And then stuff started coming out about it. And I was like, oh, well, I have a bunch of other stuff that I want to watch, including Ozark that you briefly mentioned that I haven't started yet. So I was like, I think I'll just skip this one.
Yeah, you're not missing much, man. It's kind of weird watching just these relationships fall apart. It makes you feel dirty. I don't know.
Yeah.
All right. What are you into?
I am also watching a show. I just recently got done with my Parks and Rec rewatch, which, of course, we've talked about that show a lot in our favorite TV shows of all time. Believe it made both of our lists. And then, of course, we did our retrospective. So that's not what I'm going to talk about. But I do this thing every so often where I get really into binge watching shows. It's like, I just finished The Flash. So what am I going to watch now? And then so I started watching Parks and Rec, got done with that. And I was like, okay, now what am I going to do? And so I finally decided to check off one of my Nerd Year's resolutions. I needed to watch The Wire. And so I started watching that. And it's a show that I have heard from multiple people. It's always talked about as one of the greatest shows, if not the greatest show of all time. I was actually talking to our friend Matt from The Obsessive Viewer, and he is definitely in that camp. I don't know if he would say that it's the greatest show of all time, but he definitely loves that show quite a lot. And I was talking to him about it, and I think I was about halfway through season 2 when we were having this conversation about a week ago. I'm finishing up season 3 now, so I'm a little bit further ahead than I was when we had this conversation. But I think what I said to him was that I really liked it. I just didn't greatest show of all time like it. For me, now that I'm to about the 4th season at this point, I think I only have like 2 more episodes of the 3rd season. I'm starting to kind of understand why it's talked about that way, and that kind of high regard of the greatest show of all time, but it's still not quite there for me yet. It has 5 seasons, so I'm starting to sort of get to the end, but I still got 2 more seasons to go. I'm going to kind of touch on a little bit of spoilers, not too much, but the show's been out for a decade now, so You've had plenty of opportunity to see it. So basically the way the show goes in the 1st season, I don't know if you've seen it. I know you've wanted to watch it.
I want to say it's a Nerd Year resolution for me.
I thought it was like 2 years ago, and you just never did it.
I don't know. It's somewhere. It's on my list of things to watch, yes.
For sure. So the 1st season, basically, through the first couple episodes, different cops are reluctantly put into this unit, and this unit is supposed to be like a special unit to investigate this criminal drug conspiracy. And they basically are going after this one guy. And by the end of the first season, they, to a certain extent, get this one guy and a couple of his other cronies. And so it disbands, the unit disbands, and then the second season picks up, and you're kind of like checking in with these, because they've gone their own separate ways, these cops that were in this unit. And then through other circumstances, the unit kind of comes together. And I was thinking when I was going into this show, and maybe this was a fault of me, but I was going into it thinking, okay, this is the greatest show of all time.
Yeah.
So I had really, really high expectations for it. And the first season was really, really good. I enjoyed it thoroughly. But then when the second season started, I felt like it was much of the same stuff that we were watching. Yeah, it was a different case, and it did add some elements here and there, and it did kind of build on the first season, which is one of the things that I really like about the show, is the fact that it builds on itself. The things that happened in the first season still matter in the third season, so I really appreciate that. But I just felt like it was much of the same, and with a show that's been described to me as the greatest of all time, again, my expectations may have been too high. I expected more from it, like a show like Dexter, and I know this is one of your favorite shows, but it got to the point where it was just like, okay, let's introduce the big bad, and then at some point towards the end of this season, Dexter and the big bad are going to go at it, and he's going to kill him, and then we're never going to see that guy again.
Yeah.
And it's really not going to play that big of a role in the rest of the series. I just expected more from this show. Dexter's all right. Those shows that do that are all right, but when you have this expectation of a show being the greatest show of all time, I expected more of it. Now, the third season, it's starting to kind of come together. It's like, as far as I understand why it's talked in such a high regard, because it's starting to kind of give you a bigger sense of the city, because it's based in Baltimore.
Yeah.
And the first season kind of gives you that street level drug conspiracy. The second season, like I said, is a little bit much of the same, but they do have a little bit more of an international villain, and they do have some human trafficking stuff in there. And the stuff from the first season keeps creeping up in the second season. In the third season, they definitely introduce a more political corruption element to it, and that's a big part of the third season. So it's taking you from that street level view, and it's kind of expanding it a little bit, and you're kind of seeing more of how corrupt Baltimore is, at least in the show. I've never been there. I would have no idea, but I'm assuming it's pretty true to life, because the way that people talk about it,
yeah.
I would assume that that'd be the case. So I'm starting to kind of see why people talk about it in such high regard. Still not quite there for me, but I really love that it's giving you that wider view of the city. Plus, it builds on itself. Like I was saying, like the stuff that happens in the first season, you're starting to see a lot of these characters grow, and I appreciate that a lot. I mean, that's what makes TV great, is that you have such a long time to build these characters, and they go through ups and downs, and I really appreciate that show, or this show, doing that as well as it does.
Yeah, this is, I mean, as we kind of brought up, a show that I've been wanting to watch for a while, and it's just something that I never really want to tackle, I guess. For me, it's when I'm looking for something new to watch, I tend to go towards things like Friends from College, which is
comedies, easy watches. Yeah,
easy watches. I don't need to be really involved with it, because a lot of times I'll put it on and take notes for the podcast or surf the web, whatever. And with that kind of show like The Wire, or something like Game of Thrones, I want to be completely involved with it. And so it's so funny to talk about it and say like, oh, that's a harder watch than something else, because you're sitting on the couch watching TV, but it kind of is. So it's more involved watching shows like that.
Oh yeah, it's definitely a show that you have to sit down and you have to really, really pay attention. There's been a couple of times where I'll rewatch part of an episode because I'm like, wait a second, I think I might have not been paying attention because I'm not quite sure exactly why this person is doing this. And then I'll rewind it and rewatch part of an episode because I'm just like, wait a second, I think I might have missed something. So it's definitely something that you have to be paying a little bit more attention. I still get on my phone. I still do certain things while I play with the dogs or something like that. But it's definitely something that I feel like you should definitely pay a lot more attention to because it's so well put together that everything matters in the show eventually. So I really appreciate it for that.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so our next segment is just plainly called Comics. Tyler and I read a ton of comics each week, and we like to spotlight one or two. So what'd you read this week?
So, Pat, if I were to ask you what genre is really oversaturated right now, what would you say?
In comics, superheroes, obviously.
No. Well, different route. So I'll just go. We won't play this fucking game. I'm going to talk about Dead of Winter #1.
Okay.
So zombies is what
cool.
I was going for there.
That actually probably would have been my second choice.
Yeah, which makes sense because it definitely is oversaturated. And Dead of Winter #1 is a zombie comic. It's put out by Oni. It was written by Kyle Starks. And drawn by Gabo Batista, who I'm not familiar with, but his art was amazing. So apparently Dead of Winter is a board game, but I had no idea until way after I read this comic. Well, not way after. It just came out Wednesday, so a few days after. But basically the comic doesn't really, I think, stay true to the board game. It just follows a group of survivors in the zombie apocalypse, but the star of the comic is a super dog who is named Sparky. And he's a former TV star, kind of like in Lassie vein. They show him rescuing somebody from a well in a flashback, so very much Lassie-like. And this dog is a zombie killing machine. As multiple characters put it throughout the issue, man, that dog really hates zombies. So he wears a cape and it's crazy, but it's really funny. So this issue starts off with some people trapped in a house, and they are saved by a group of survivors that includes Sparky. The other characters that kind of save them along with Sparky are Gabriel, who is a former firefighter, and then my personal favorite character, Ruckus Burley, who is defined only as white trash. And that's where Kyle Starks, I think, shines. What I'm starting to notice with all these comics I talk about that he's done, like Kill 'Em All, Sex Castle, Rock Candy Mountain, and now this, is that he has a unique talent at giving hilarious voice to hillbilly and white trash characters.
Okay.
And I think that it
probably
might
comes
have
a lot to do with the fact that he lives in Evansville.
Exactly.
He's from Evansville.
Yep. And that's exactly what I was getting at. Yeah. He has probably dealt with it just like we have, being from Evansville. And Ruckus, the character, is no exception to that. I do want to point out one of his best lines in the whole book. He said they were trying to find something. They were getting ready to go scavenge like a pharmacy or something. And they were looking for something in particular. And he said it would be looking for a fart in a hot air balloon.
All right.
Just classic stuff there. So after kind of going back to the beginning of the comic, these characters that are trapped in the house get rescued. And after that is pretty much standard zombie fare. There's a really fun, humorous tone to it, though, and I don't know that that's necessarily as prevalent in all the zombie stuff that's out there. It's definitely oversaturated, the market is, like I said, but I'm definitely in on this book because it has a unique voice, and obviously, if you can't tell by now, I'm a huge Kyle Starks fan, so it's really funny. The ending of the book's really hilarious because they're, like I said, going on a scavenge, and they're in the pharmacy looking for certain things, and the girls that are on the scavenge turn the corner and say, "Oh my god, we hit the jackpot." And the next panel is what the jackpot is, and it's this giant stack of tampons.
Oh yeah,
like in a supermarket. And that's something that you don't really hear people talk about in the post apocalyptic worlds of, females still needing those types of items. So it's going to explore that type of stuff and have that humorous tone, and so I'm really excited to see where this book goes.
So would you say that, and I'm pretty sure I know your answer because you mentioned that he didn't actually draw this book.
Correct.
You think he's a stronger writer than he is an artist? Do you think that's kind of his strength and that maybe he should go more towards books that he only has to write?
I think that it's probably easier for him.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I don't want to discount writers because there's a lot of brain power, obviously, that goes into that. But I think that the illustration is what takes so long. So he's probably able to sit down and write these comics for like Rick and Morty or this and turn them in and have somebody else draw them. Whereas Rock Candy Mountain or the other graphic novels he's put out through Image where he's drawn as well, like Sex Castle and Kill 'Em All, probably is more of a labor of love for him that's taken more time. That being said, his art is definitely his own.
Yeah.
But it's not by any means like great.
Yeah.
And I hate to say that because he has his own style, but it's more cartoony, and that's not the type of art that I necessarily look for in my comics. So I think that he's going to save that for his own like personal.
Sure, yeah, I get that. I was just curious because I know you've talked about that when you've talked about Rock Candy Mountain. Like his artwork is a little strange.
Yeah, so I think that he's kind of found his niche. Like he has his books that he loves to write and draw, but then he's able to also go to other publishers like Oni and say, "Okay, I'll do a comic based on a board game for you, no big deal."
Rick and Morty, that kind of stuff. So
I mean, obviously he's staying pretty busy. He has quite a bit out there right now.
For sure.
All right, dude, what'd you read?
All right, so this is going to be the second episode in a row that I talk about something TMNT related. I talked about the main book last week, and now I'm going to talk about a spin-off of that book, TMNT Dimension X. For those that don't know, that's where Krang is from, which Krang is my second favorite TMNT villain. He's super, super weird, but I guess if you're thinking about it, the turtles are kind of silly themselves. So it's not like a super huge leap from mutant turtles to this giant brain that happens to be from a different dimension.
Yeah.
Just saying that out loud seems super silly. But like I said, I mean, the turtles are kind of inherently silly, but that's what's fun about it. Like I said, this is a spinoff of the main book. What the turtles are trying to do, I guess, is a spin-off of I almost said episode, issue 73, which I haven't read yet. It came out the same week as this book. I haven't read it yet. Basically what they're trying to do is they're trying to go through and find all of these witnesses for the trial of Krang. They've captured Krang. They did that a while back in the main book, and I guess now they're trying to put him on trial and find all these witnesses, which is kind of a cool way to expand the universe. I talked about last week that felt like they were kind of losing their way a little bit, and so I appreciate that they're trying to expand the universe a little bit. This book started off really strong. I liked the fact that the turtles were exploring this new world, and there's some squabbling between some turtles, and I think that that's really cool because I think you forget sometimes that they are supposed to be teenagers, and so they do kind of get on each other's nerves, and I think that was pretty fun. There's some really cool artwork. It's not drawn the same way that the main book has been drawn in the past, and it's super, super colorful, and I really appreciate they kind of give Dimension X its own look, and I really appreciate that. Like I said, I love the squabbling between the turtles. The witness's backstory, that eventually when they find the witness, they kind of talk to him about what happened with Krang. It's short, but I think it's definitely interesting, and I would look forward to kind of seeing the trial of Krang with that witness, because I think even though the witness is character design is super, super basic, I think the backstory is really interesting. Unfortunately, that's pretty much all of the good stuff in this book. Super, super weak villain. Really cool. It's almost different, completely opposite sides of the spectrum from the witness. His character design is really, really cool. I like the look of the villain, but super, super weak. His motivations are really weak and not really all that explained. His kind of abilities are super lame. The few action scenes that you get in this book are very, very weak. Basically, the idea of the planet that they're on is it based on their emotions. So the more angry they are, the stronger they are, or the happier they are, the stronger they are. So it's really kind of weird, and they use that to basically make the turtles super heroes. I mean, well, they already are superheroes, but like just have like ridiculous abilities, and it just, I don't know, it just kind of makes for a very anticlimactic ending to the book. So I would definitely say skip it. I'm not going to continue reading this miniseries.
Cool. I saw that it came out, and I clicked on it to see what it was about, and it said it tied into the main story, and I'm just not even anywhere near being caught up on that, so I did not opt to buy it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that you necessarily need to read it. I think it would have helped if I had read the 73, even though I know what's happened with Krang up until this point. It doesn't necessarily tie that much into the main book. like I said, I haven't read 73, so maybe that explains a little bit more what's exactly happening.
Yeah.
Because there's other people with them at one point in the book that are kind of like helping them, and I'm not quite sure who those people are and why they're with them. And so maybe that was something that was explained in 73. Like I said, I'm not quite sure. So maybe that would have been helpful. But all in all, I went in it somewhat blind, and I don't think it made a whole lot of difference.
Cool.
All right, so what's nerd news this week?
All right, so you and I were kind of talking before we started recording, and, it's always slim pickings whenever you are fresh out of Comic-Con. So
yeah,
not a ton of stuff out there, but a few things I wanted to bring up. The first is that YouTube Red is going to put together a Karate Kid show.
Okay.
And it's going to be a sequel to the original movie, and Ralph Macchio and I don't know the bad guy. What's the actor's name? He was on How I Met Your Mother.
I can see his face.
Yeah, I forget his name, but they're both coming back for it, and it's going to be a sequel series to the original film. And I'm not honestly familiar with the Karate Kid movies, so I don't know if it will incorporate what happens in the sequels or not.
I was going to say they already made sequels.
Yeah, so I guess they're older, and I don't know what it entail, but it's a 30-minute comedy, and I think YouTube Red is just trying to jump on like the Netflix, Hulu type streaming train. So yeah, I'm not interested in it. I'll be honest with you. I've never seen Karate Kid. So
really,
yeah,
I really like the first one. The sequels you could probably just skip.
Yeah, it's something that I'll watch eventually, and it's definitely, for whatever reason, I just never watched it when I was growing up. So no interest, but it is kind of weird that they're doing it to me.
Yeah, it kind of seems like they're going the Netflix model, because Netflix, when they started going into the kind of original programming, it was a lot of, let's make new seasons of the Arrested Development or Full House. And that's kind of how they started somewhat. I mean, of course, they still had House of Cards and a few actual original programming, but it seemed like that's the easiest way to go, just kind of test the waters a little bit. And YouTube Red is still fairly new thing, and it really kind of hasn't found its footing as far as I'm concerned. But I'm not huge. I mean, we do the YouTube, but the fact that I called it the YouTube it means that I'm really not that hip to it. So yeah, I never really considered watching YouTube Red.
Yeah, me either. I no need for it in my life, I don't think. So next is HBO. It apparently has been hacked.
Yeah, I heard that.
And the hackers are threatening to release things today, I believe. We're recording on a Sunday morning, so the day before this episode will go out. So we'll see if that comes to fruition by the end of the day. On an unrelated note, episode 4 of Game of Thrones, which premieres tonight, which will have already premiered when this episode goes out, leaked on Thursday or Friday.
Yep.
And they said that has nothing to do with the alleged hack. It's just leaked from somebody who got the episode early, like some kind of reviewer, I think. I might be wrong there. But I would never, ever, ever admit to streaming or watching anything illegally. But if I had a friend or somebody that saw episode 4 of Game of Thrones, they told me that it's really good.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. So it should be a good episode tonight. And of course, when this episode's released, probably our listeners that watch Game of Thrones will have seen it, but it's pretty good from what I hear.
Yeah, I'd like to reprimand your friend. Yeah, we don't do that. We don't condone that here on the podcast.
That's right. So HBO, don't sue either of us. It was a friend. Let's see. Moving on. This one was kind of interesting to me because I'm curious what could have been. But I guess Jeff Bridges was being interviewed about something, and he said originally his character in the original Iron Man, Obadiah Stane, was supposed to live. So that kind of has repercussions. I wonder how he would have been utilized in the Marvel Cinematic Universe if he had lived. One thing that was also interesting was I think he was asked by the interviewer about the Captain Marvel movie being a prequel and being set in the 90s, and if he would possibly show up in that. And I believe he said never say never, which is interesting. I think that would kind of be cool to bring that character back because he was interesting. He was an interesting character, an interesting villain. And of course, he's dispatched in the first ever Marvel Cinematic Universe movie, and we don't really explore him anymore. So I would like to see him come back in Captain Marvel, just if it's one scene or whatever, or I don't know. I don't think he could show up with the Cosmic Cube or anything, but I think that that's a character they could have fleshed out a little bit more.
Oh yeah, that would have been really, really cool. It never occurred to me that because it's Captain Marvel and it's a prequel that he could come back. Like that movie, as great as it is, it seems, I mean, it was a long time ago.
Yeah.
And so I forget that he's even in the Marvel Cinematic Universe sometimes. And then when I saw the story about him possibly living, I thought that actually kind of was interesting because they have such a strong relationship, him and Tony, it seems weird that they ended it with him dying.
Yeah, I guess originally they were supposed to like open up the suit and he would be gone.
Yeah,
but
that seems kind of cheesy.
And he told them he said that they changed it and they were just like, "Oh no, you're dead."
Oh yeah,
you're dead now. And he's like, "Oh okay." So I don't know. We'll see. Maybe he'll show up in Captain Marvel. Let's see. NBC is interested in reviving a bunch of their shows because why not?
Yeah.
So
because they're doing awful.
Yeah. So this was on Slash Film that I saw this, but they are interested in eventually reviving The Office.
Oh God, no.
30 Rock, ER, and The West Wing.
So obviously I don't care about ER or The West Wing, even though I've heard a lot of good things about The West Wing. I've never seen it.
I mean, why not?
I mean, seen a second of it.
I mean, ER went on forever. Like, you could do that show in any hospital, right?
Yeah.
So, whatever.
Obviously, don't touch The Office, or really, I mean, 30 Rock, I guess you could, if you could get everybody to come back, maybe, but I mean, they've told their story, and I thought that show ended really well.
So, I've never watched 30 Rock, but Slash Film had a good idea for, in my opinion, somebody who's not familiar with the story on how they could do it, is the show that Liz Lemon works on gets revived, and so it's kind of meta.
Oh yeah, that would be kind of cool.
They could kind of do that. That's what Slash Film was kind of pondering. And then The Office, it doesn't seem like they're going to do it without Greg Daniels, from what I understand. The comment was something like, we talk to Greg Daniels every so often about it, and he says maybe someday, but not now, typically. So that's the one good thing, is it doesn't sound like they're just going to
rush it.
Yeah, another Office show with completely different characters or anything. So hopefully they would contact him and they would do it right and bring back whatever.
But I don't know. I don't know how you could do it right, because the original show that was so good overstayed its welcome a little bit, even when it was originally on. So I don't see how you could bring that back and still it be fresh.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think that you just bring it back. Maybe you could do.
Well, yeah, I mean, you would have to reboot it or whatever.
Will and Grace is doing, do like a 6-episode return, or what Roseanne is doing. But again, there's no point in doing it if you can't get the entire cast to come back.
For sure.
And I mean, I don't know how that, obviously the season finale or series finale of that show wraps up everything pretty nicely. So who knows? But one more story here, and like I said, just a light news week and something that piqued my interest. Chiwetel Ejiofor, and I think I butchered his last name, and I think it's
a little bit.
Ejiofor. And I don't even know if that's right.
Nope.
And we've
just
talked about him a ton on the podcast, and we still can't get it right. But he's being circled for Scar in the Lion King movie. And I guess around D23, it had come out that Hugh Jackman was kind of being eyed for that role, but now it's him. So
yeah, I couldn't see Hugh Jackman
that. I mean, my whole thing with that character is predicated on, like, you have to sing, right?
Yeah,
the Be Prepared song, and Hugh Jackman can sing. I don't know about Chiwetel. Maybe he can sing.
I don't know. Have we heard him sing?
I don't think we have. But yeah, that cast is shaping up, but they need to get going, because James Earl Jones is Mufasa.
Yeah,
that dude's pushing 90 at this point, so
you got a ticking clock there.
Yeah, so just to run it down, I know that John Oliver is Zazu.
Yep, I thought that was awesome.
Yeah, that's really good casting. Not Danny Glover. Shit, what's his name? Why am I blanking?
Well, I don't know
Simba,
who you're
Simba.
It's Donald Glover.
Donald Glover. Why did I say Danny Glover?
I wanted to say Danny now, because that was in my. You put that fucking thing in my head.
I never even realized how close their names were.
Yeah.
Donald Glover is Simba. Mufasa is being played by James Earl Jones again, and then Billy Eichner and Seth Rogen are playing Timon and Pumbaa.
Yep.
So obviously, there's still other roles to cast. I know that it had come out that Jon Favreau wanted Beyonce to play Nala, which I think she's got a lot going on right now with her music and her
Babies.
infidelity and babies and whatever else. So who knows if that'll happen, but I think this movie comes out in 2019 or 20. So
Something like that.
cool. That's all I have for Nerd News.
All right. So each episode, we, at this point, do what we call just the main topic. It's usually a TV or movie review. And we are going to continue that trend. And we are going to review The Dark Tower, which is a new movie directed by Nikolai Arcel, which, of course, is based on the popular book series by Stephen King. It follows Jack, who tries to make sense of his strange dreams of a tower, a man in black, and a gunslinger. So we've actually had this conversation a couple of times. I've only read the first book, and unless you speed read it in the last couple of weeks, I don't think that you have read it either. The first book just kind of wasn't my cup of tea. I know it's super, super popular. I know that the books get better as you go along. Our friend, again, from the Obsessive Viewer, Matt Hurt, is a huge fan of this book series. It's kind of his Planet of the Apes. It's something that he has been looking forward to for a long, long time, and I'm sorry for you, Matt. But anyways, as film nerds, when a movie comes out, there are several things that studios do that are kind of red flags that tell us that they don't think the movie's going to be very good. And there is quite a few of these red flags, at least for me, when this movie was about to come out. First of all, for a big blockbuster movie like The Dark Tower, there wasn't a ton of promotional material for this movie. There was some, but I mean, with those big blockbusters, you see them everywhere. And I wasn't seeing a ton of that. And the little that I was seeing, I wasn't crazy about. I've talked about with the trailers and stuff that we've discussed in the podcast that I just didn't think it looked all that great. It just didn't blow me away. And then, of course, I found out just recently that it was only going to be 95 minutes, which is crazy because it's based on these books. There's 8 books, or maybe there's only 7. I don't know. But there's quite a few books. You would think that these big blockbusters are at least an hour and 45 to 2 hours, especially a book or a movie like this that's setting up all of these books. You would think that it would be at least 2 hours. And the fact that it was only 95 minutes seemed like it was just a hack and slash job by the editor, which I will get into later. And then, of course, when reviews start coming out, there are a certain thing called a review embargo, where studios will not let people review it, or at least not post it until right before the movie comes out. For good movies that studios have faith in, you will see reviews for like usually a week ahead of time. With War for the Planet of the Apes, I was seeing reviews on Rotten Tomatoes like 2 weeks ahead of time. So I had really good feeling about that movie going in because they obviously had a lot of faith in it. They let people post stuff because you can get good buzz and more people will go see it because it's getting good reviews. On the flip side of that, if you get a lot of negative reviews, people will stay away. This movie didn't even have a review embargo. They weren't even letting them see the movie until Wednesday, which is even worse. At least with the review embargo, they let you see the movie ahead of time, and you just can't post your review until they were literally not letting reviewers see the movie until Wednesday. And at this point, you guys probably already know that even though technically the movie doesn't come out on Friday, everybody can see it on Thursday. You have the 7, the 9 o'clock showings on Thursday. So essentially movies come out on Thursday now. So if you're not letting reviewers see the movie until Wednesday, you are just telling everyone that it's not very good, that you have zero faith in it. All that being said, I really wanted to keep an open mind because I like Stephen King quite a lot. Even though the first book wasn't my cup of tea, I still really wanted this book or this movie to succeed.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you. This was a movie I was definitely rooting for, but yeah,
you kind of had to root for it too.
Yeah, and I'll get into that in my broad strokes a little bit whenever we get started. But yeah, pretty disappointing because this was long gestating.
Yeah, it was kind of one of those movies that they pointed to for a long time that was in production hell, as they call it. They've been trying to make this movie forever, and spoiler alert for our review that we're about to get into, but it's kind of a shame that this is the movie that we got.
Yeah, it's kind of weird that
for
this
sure.
movie that we got. I think there's probably a story out there somewhere about why this turned out the way it did, but that we haven't heard
for
yet.
sure. They're already starting to come out with stories about how there was focus groups and they almost fired the director because the focus groups were so bad. And the only reason they kept him on was because they were like, oh, well, we're showing these groups the movie that special effects aren't even done yet. So maybe that's why they didn't like it. But they literally almost fired the director. It was his feature film debut, I believe. So, yeah, they obviously didn't have a ton of faith in him. And I mean, we'll just jump right into it. Broad strokes is the first segment that we get into with our reviews. Is just kind of how we felt in general terms about whatever we're reviewing. So how'd you feel of The Dark Tower?
So I kind of hinted at it there a second ago, but I was rooting for this movie for multiple reasons. I love Stephen King, and of course I want anything based on his work to be amazing. Of course, Rotten Tomatoes draft pick. It got taken pretty late.
Yeah,
but
both of his Stephen King movies, so to speak, got taken sort of late.
Which this sits at 18% right now. And the last movie that I got stuck with, that was the last movie that we drafted, was The Mummy, and that's at 16%. So if you would have told me at the beginning of the year The Dark Tower was going to be as bad as The Mummy, I would have told you to go fuck yourself. There's no way. From the material it's based on alone. But yet here we are. The last thing that I wanted to root for it for was, I hate to keep bringing him up. This will be the third time we brought him up on the podcast, but Matt Hurt from The Obsessed Viewer was so excited about it. Like, him and I talked at any PopCon, and like, this is his Star Wars or his Batman or the stuff we really look forward to. This was it for him. And so the fact that it was not good is disappointing. So it took a long time, like we were talking about, for this story to get to the big screen. And I'm not sure where all that effort went with the final product that we got here. I feel like there was so much potential, and the source material was amazing. So to make a really generic movie that felt more like a bad, like, Hunger Games movie or Divergent or something like that, instead of like a Stephen King epic, is pretty disappointing. And I hate to say this, but I think that this movie, unfortunately, may have scared me off from the source material.
Really?
So I bought The Gunslinger, and my intention was to read it before the movie comes out. But as with most things in my life, I just never got around to it, and it's on my bookshelf. And I don't know. This story was super boring, and it came across just generic and unimaginative. And like I said, a 95-minute movie that you were looking at your watch, like, when is this going to be over? That's a really bad sign. So I don't know if I'll ever visit the source material or not for this film.
See, I think we're going to disagree. I did not like this movie. So I'm definitely going to come out with a more positive review than it sounds like you're going to, but I just wanted to get that out there that I didn't really like this movie all that much, but I feel like I'm going to sound a little bit more positive than you do. I mean, you brought up the Rotten Tomatoes thing, and obviously we've talked a lot in the past that we try not to let that affect when you're going into a movie, especially a movie that we want to review on the podcast, because obviously we value you guys listening to us, and if we're just spouting off stuff that this other person said, then why would you even listen to us? So you come here for our thoughts and not other people's. So really, really try not to let that affect me. But when you have a score so low as 18%, it's hard not to let that creep into you, because it's really hard to get that low of a score. So you kind of expect like a dumpster fire of a movie. And I honestly didn't think it was that bad. I definitely don't think it's 18% bad. I think that it really has a lot of the pieces to make a really solid film. Now, a lot of that goes to the source material, the fact that it's based on these really popular series of books by Stephen King, who is an author obviously everybody loves. Like, I've never heard anyone say really a ton of bad things about him. I just felt like we got half of a movie here. Forget 2 hours. I mentioned that these big blockbusters are typically 2 hours long. Forget that. I feel like this movie needed to be like 3 hours long, because I had a somewhat similar reaction. Was I looked at my watch and I was like, oh man, because I knew it was only 95 minutes. I was actually kind of starting to get a little into this movie, but then I looked at my watch and I was like, shit, it's going to be over in 15 minutes. I'm like, how is this going to wrap up in 15 minutes? Because I was getting kind of into it. So I definitely think that there's some stuff here that's worth like salvaging, and I know that they're going to try to make a TV show out of it, but with all the bad reviews, and I don't think it's going to do very well at the box office. I don't know if we're ever going to see that. We're definitely not going to see another Dark Tower movie, but I would be interested to see if they ever make the TV show happen.
Yeah.
All right, so let's just dive right into the story. How'd you feel about the story?
So I know you touched on the runtime, and I will say, going into the movie, I wasn't necessarily turned off by the 95 minutes at first. I was actually kind of excited because I'm at the point where I'm kind of over the 2.5-hour epics, unless they're about franchises I really care about, like Star Wars or Batman or whatever, where I just want to.
But there's so much in this movie.
So I went into it with the mindset that tell me a story that concentrates on what's happening at hand in a straightforward way that doesn't do too much. And I'm like, I don't think that 95
but
minutes.
But that's not what Stephen King does.
Well, I didn't think that 95 minutes was going to be an issue. Unfortunately, that was the movie's downfall for me. I felt like it did way too little. I never read the book. I don't know the characters. I don't know what's happening here. And I felt like none of it was explained to me. I felt like it was all just rushed and not fleshed out. You set up these things and it all happens so quick.
Oh yeah, for sure.
There's giant leaps that you have to take and it doesn't necessarily make sense in the narrative. So it presents these crazy sci-fi realizations that we're expected to buy into, and there's no real stakes that are fleshed out enough to care about anyone involved, in my opinion. I felt like they were scared to do anything with the story. It took what I imagined as an epic because, like you said, 7 books, comics, just all
maybe
sorts
8 books.
Yeah, all sorts of source material, and dwindled it down to this small movie where no real risks are taken. It felt painfully generic, which is hard to comprehend given the talent involved, which we'll get more into whenever we get to performances. But for me, Stephen King is just this imaginative storyteller, and nothing in this movie is imaginative. Everything wraps up too easy at the end, and there's no real implication of anything being at risk that we should care about, in my opinion. For me to buy into a movie, I have to care about the characters, and I cared about nothing that was happening on the screen throughout this entire film.
So I agree with most of what you said. I put it on a different aspect. So I think most of my problems with this movie, obviously I don't know, we're just speculating here, but I put on most of the problems on the editing. I am really interested in seeing, and I don't know we'll ever get this because, like I said, there's stories coming out that they almost fired the director, so I don't know if we'll ever get a director's cut of this film, but I would definitely be interested in seeing something like that because, like I said, in broad strokes, I think it had the pieces to be a really good job. Or a really good movie. I just think that the editing job was really, really piss poor. I would say that it was the worst editing job I've ever seen, or at least seen in a while, but we reviewed The Circle earlier this year, and that was, oh my God, that was just a butcher job. So I wouldn't be surprised if they shot like close to 3 hours of material because of all of this stuff that they introduce and just never develop whatsoever.
Yeah.
It's so weird the way that they very rarely explain anything in this movie, and then when they do explain something, it's very like nonchalant. For example, there's one part that was probably my least favorite part of the movie. It seemed like the dumbest thing to include when you only have a 95-minute movie. The house demon was really stupid.
Yep.
The design of it was really stupid. The fact that it was even there to begin with was really stupid. It didn't need to be in there. I guess for them to track him, it kind of did, but I felt like you could have come up with a better way for that same thing to happen. And Matthew McConaughey's character is just like, oh yeah, the house demon, they're pretty silly or whatever. And he just kind of, just a one-line thing that kind of explains it, but not really, just in a really nonchalant way. And I was just like, okay, well, that was a stupid thing to even have in the movie if you're just going to spend 30 seconds explaining it. And then there's later, just maybe 15 minutes later in the movie, there's this really cool monster that they fight, and that's not really ever explained, and it's super, super dark. Like the atmosphere, the cinematography in the movie is super, super dark, so you can't really see the monster all that well. And maybe that was a budget saving maneuver, because I know that some movies will do that, make the kind of the atmosphere really dark.
Yeah.
So you can't see the CGI if it's not the top notch CGI that we're used to. So that might just been a case of trying to save a little bit budget here and there. But with a big blockbuster like this, I can't imagine that you would do that. But like they kind of nonchalant explain stuff, but then at other times they put stuff in there that doesn't make sense, like with the actual story. So that would again lead me to believe that it just wasn't edited very well. Kind of the perfect example of this is, so they come up with this plan in the movie where they're like, okay, well, we know where the Man in Black is. We need to get there. It's going to take us forever to get there, but we have these portals. So the Man in Black is at this place, but all the portals are heavily guarded. So we're going to go to New York, and then we're going to go to one of his bases so he can use that portal. Well, that doesn't really make sense, because obviously one of his bases is going to be heavily guarded as well. So if you don't want to get caught, it doesn't seem like it would make sense to me to go to that base and then teleport to this other place. So if you can get over that part of it, that plot hole right there, when they go to teleport or go through the portal or whatever you want to call it, the guy says to Jake, remember this number so you can get back. None of the plan involved them coming back to this fucking village. So why was that even in there? So that would lead me to believe that there was a different version of this movie where they did plan on coming back. Because why else would you have that in the movie? None of the plan involves them coming back to this stupid fucking village. Why would they ever care about coming back? Once they go back to his main base and the plan is to kill him, why would they ever care to come back to this fucking town that they just stumbled upon? So there's so many of those things in this movie that I'm just like, there has to be at least an hour more of material that they shot for this movie that they just left on the cutting room floor, because there was so much stuff that they introduced and either didn't explain or didn't really make sense with the movie that we got.
No, I completely agree. And one thing that we hadn't brought up yet that I want to touch on really quick before we move on to performances is one thing in the story that made me cringe and I hated was the fish out of water stuff whenever they go to New York.
That's so annoying. It could have been played a lot better than it. Well,
it's such a fucking trope at this point.
Yeah.
And it didn't fit in the movie that they created. Like, I don't give a shit about the gunslinger eating a hot dog.
Yeah.
Like, come on. So I wish that we could have circumvented that at some point too, because that happened towards the climax of the movie, and it was just at that point I wasn't really bought in, and then that just kind of was the cherry on top for me.
I will say, again, I think I'm going to be a little bit more positive, so I feel like I should put, before we move on to the performances, I think I should put another thing that I liked about this movie. I've only read the first book, and the first book is called The Gunslinger, and so obviously that particular book is from the gunslinger's perspective. I really liked. I thought it was smart that this movie was from Jake's perspective. Essentially, it's his movie. I don't know if the rest of the books are. I know he plays a part in the first book. He's in the first book.
Yeah.
But I don't know if the rest of the books are from his perspective or not, but I thought that was pretty smart. Now, the rest of the movie didn't really do a very good job kind of fleshing some stuff out, but I thought it was a pretty smart move to make the connection with the kid. And I think that they, as well as you can do in a 95-minute movie, I thought they at least tried to develop his character a little bit. The first act of this movie I thought was really well done, but then once he meets the gunslinger, it kind of goes off the rails. So I really appreciated basically the first act of this movie. I thought was really well done.
Okay.
I'm assuming by your facial expressions that you do not agree with me.
I think every act of this movie was bad.
Okay.
I just don't feel like anything was fleshed out enough. Like I will say I was more bought into the first act.
Okay.
But it was still just a little rushed for me.
Yeah, for sure. It feels weird because I felt like, and I know we keep harping on the 95 minutes, but it felt like going into this movie, I was really digging the first act, but also in the back of my mind, I was like, what the fuck are they doing? They're wasting too much. Like, knowing that they only had 95 minutes, I was like, we've already spent a good chunk of that just getting to know the kid, which is great. I mean, you want character development for sure. We shit on other movies for not having that, but at the same time, knowing that this is going to be a really short movie, I felt like they needed to get there quicker. But yeah, it was really weird. I don't understand why they cut this movie as bad as they did.
Yeah.
All right, so on to the performances. The big thing for me with this movie when they were doing the casting is that we had Idris Elba, which is a fantastic actor who is coincidentally in the show that I talked about, The Wire, that I was into. Well, I didn't do that on purpose. It just so happened that we saw this movie as I'm trying to watch The Wire. And Matthew McConaughey, which he's had a really roller coaster career, but recently you think, oh, Matthew McConaughey's in a movie, it's going to be solid.
The McConaissance.
Exactly. I just didn't want to say that because it's stupid. But I thought he was really bad in this movie. McConaughey, I thought he was awful. It was just so one note. And the character is, at least in the first book for me, isn't that guy. I just don't imagine that guy being Matthew McConaughey in this movie. It was just really one note, and it felt like he was phoning it in. And if you were going to do that, why even be in this movie?
Mortgage payment? I don't know. But going into this, I didn't think this would be a place where I would complain.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, okay, the movie might be bad, but I mean, Idris Elba and Matthew McConaughey, come on. Like, the performances at least be good. But I thought that Idris Elba was really one note. There wasn't much that
I don't necessarily agree. I don't think that he was given enough to work with ultimately, because you don't see his character as much as you see maybe Jake.
I just don't think he emotes at all in this movie.
Well, the character doesn't really, at least the first book doesn't really.
Oh, I mean, that's still poor acting. I mean, if whether it's the character's fault or his fault, like he doesn't do anything. Matthew McConaughey, you said, was bad. He was very uninspired by this movie, or by the material, I think. And for whatever reason, I mean, I guess it's always been there, but for some reason in this movie particularly, it annoyed me. The whistle in his voice.
Yeah,
it was very prevalent in this movie, and it annoyed the shit out of me, and I don't know why. But
he just didn't have that presence.
Yeah, he wasn't a very good bad guy.
He just seemed really silly. Like, I don't know. He just didn't. Yeah. I don't know.
He didn't seem menacing.
Exactly. Yeah. He just didn't have. Yeah. I didn't buy the fact that everyone was scared of him. That he just didn't have that presence to him.
Yeah. I thought that the kid who played Jake Chambers was pretty annoying.
Really?
Yeah. I don't think he was very good. And
I thought the character was annoying, but I thought the kid played him fairly well.
The last thing that I just have for performances is that poor Allstate guy. I'll never be able to take him seriously in a movie because all I see is him as the Allstate guy. So, I mean, he's obviously doesn't have a big part in this movie. He plays Idris Elba's father in flashbacks or whatever. But yeah, I mean, anytime he talks, it's just like, all right, it's an Allstate commercial. So
yeah. I can't even think of anybody else in this movie that we haven't discussed, but yeah.
For some reason, Jackie Earle Haley's in it. He doesn't.
Yeah,
really
I was like, oh yeah, he's an actor. I forgot about him. I forgot that he even existed.
Yeah.
All right, so on to the action, and this is actually the part of the movie that I thought I was going to dislike the most because of the trailers. It just looked really uninspired to me. Just the special effects and the creature design, the little that we see in the trailer, I just thought it didn't look all that good. But like I said a little bit in the story, I thought them fighting that one monster, I thought that was pretty cool. It just wasn't explained hardly at all. And so I was kind of bummed about that, but I thought the creature looked pretty good. There was a particular fight scene in the village that I thought was all right, because there's a similar scene, at least in the first book, and I thought that was kind of what they were trying to go for, and I really appreciate that. Even though they were, in the book, he's fighting the villagers in the town. In the movie, he's fighting some of the henchmen of the Man in Black. So they changed it up a little bit. So I'm not sure if that's exactly where they were going for, but I thought that it was reminiscent of that fight in the book. So I appreciated that. So I was actually pleasantly surprised at how much I liked the action. Now the action at the end, the very climax of the movie, the showdown, was pretty fucking lame. But other than that, I really appreciated the action much more than I thought I was going to.
I didn't think the action was awful by any means, but I thought the CGI was pretty bad.
Oh, yeah. The glass at the end, that was fucking stupid.
Yeah, so that kind of took me out of the action a little bit because like the monster that they fight in the woods, and I forget what it's called or why it's important, but
I actually thought that monster looked pretty cool.
I thought that the CGI for it was like 10 years old.
Yeah.
I don't know if again, we talked about cost saving measures. I don't know if that was part of it, or maybe I'm just being too critical at this point, but yeah, I mean, the action was fine, but it was surrounded by a bunch of shit. So
yeah,
I don't know. I wasn't captivated.
I think the gunslinging aspect of it was pretty cool. I generally like Westerns for the most part, and so I kind of liked that aspect of it. Now, it wasn't done as much as I would have liked, but I still really bought into that part of the movie. All right, so yeah, this review was kind of short, but the movie itself is kind of short.
How much can you say about a 95-minute movie?
We actually recorded about an hour of this review. I just cut it up to be shorter. Now, so what do you think of the movie as far as the star rating is concerned?
I'm going to give it 2 stars.
Okay.
There's bits and pieces that are salvageable. So it's not like The Mummy bad, but it's pretty bad still.
So we have established that 3 stars means that we recommend this movie. And I kept going back and forth between 2.5 and 3 because I do think that there's good enough in this movie. Don't let the 18% on Rotten Tomatoes scare you away. So I do kind of want to say that I recommend this, but I would say that if you could find like a director's cut of this movie, then definitely see that instead. But ultimately, if I had to give it a star rating, which obviously I do because that's what we do when we review these movies, I'm going to go with 2.5.
Yeah, you brought up an interesting point there. If they can salvage this, if they put out like a Blu-ray that's like, here's all the shit that we didn't put in a director's cut.
Like the Daredevil.
Yeah, like they're not going to do that because it sounds like they're probably not on good terms with the director.
Yeah.
But like I would buy that Blu-ray, even though I obviously was not a fan of this
That would
movie.
be a Black Friday Blu-ray, though.
But out of curiosity alone, I would pick it up and watch it and add it to the collection just for the Stephen King aspect of it. So
for sure.
Yeah, that'd be cool if they did it, but I doubt they will.
Especially with a movie like this, it's tough to do it like that because sometimes if they don't think that they're going to put it in the movie, if there's a lot of special effects,
which I'm sure this movie had.
Yeah, they won't even finish it. I know with like I've brought this up like a million times, but like Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, they talk about that in the director's commentary. They didn't really shoot a ton of extra stuff because there's so much special effects in there. If you were going to finish it, it was going to be in the movie. So there was, especially when he teleports to the other world, there's a lot of special effects towards that part of the movie. So I'd be surprised if they had a ton of finished stuff, but I would definitely be interested in seeing it for sure.
For sure.
All right. So every episode, we always end it with a nerdy question. The segment's called Nerd Favorite. We take turns asking each other what our favorite whatever the subject is that week. And so since we just talked about the Dark Tower and, of course, Idris Elba's in this movie, which I think I pronounce his name differently every single time, I wanted to talk about your favorite performance of his. He's actually considered a really great actor, but unfortunately for good reason, because he is really solid, but he doesn't make the best choices because I was looking at his filmography and there's a lot of shit in there. But I would say, and this is probably a weird choice because you don't see him at all in it, but I think that can be an advantage because and it could show you how good an actor is. I'm going to go with The Jungle Book because I think that he does such a good job of putting such emotion in just his voice, because that's what you have to do when you're in a movie like this. You have to convey so much emotion just through the tone of your voice. Now, of course, the CGI obviously helps the fact that you are this character and they can put emotions into the character. It definitely helps, but just the strength of his voice really adds to that character a lot. And I think that he does a really great job adding to that movie.
Yeah, I'm going to stay within that same vein because I just quickly, since you just put it out there, went through his filmography to see what I should pick. And you're right, it's pretty bad. So I just have to go with a movie that I love that he is in, which is Zootopia. And it's kind of the same thing you were saying with him being Shere Khan. But what I like about him in Zootopia is he kind of gets to do some comedy.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And he doesn't really get to do that. Like, he's on The Office, but...
Barely.
But he doesn't do anything funny on The Office. Like, he's always the straight guy because he has that demeanor and he has that voice. But in Zootopia, he kind of gets to explore that a little bit and be a little funnier. And, of course, it's a great movie as well. So I would have probably picked Jungle Book had you not, but... second, I'll go Zootopia, which is a shame that there's not more to pick from. Like, Star Trek Beyond, his face is covered up the entire time. And
yeah, we talked about that when we reviewed it.
Yeah, pretty generic. So hopefully better roles come his way.
For sure. All right, so that's the end of episode, I believe it's 152 of the Nerds You're Looking For podcast. Of course, we'd appreciate if you subscribe, rate, review us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, basically any good podcatcher you use. We're on it. You can also visit our website, thenerdspodcast.com. Also, comment and subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Nerds You're Looking For. You can also check out our Twitch channel. I'm going to stop pimping our weekly streams because we have not done them in a couple of weeks, but I'm definitely going to look at my schedule and try to figure out a day that I know for a fact, at least one day a week that I can go on and stream, because I do enjoy doing it. It's just the last couple of weeks have been really busy. And I picked Wednesday. I don't know why I picked Wednesday, because it's actually usually a pretty busy day for me. All right, so you can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram. They're both at The Nerds Podcast. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Google+. You can also email us at thenerdsyou'relooking4@gmail.com. Finally, you can also vote for us for Podcast of the Month at podcastland.com. For Patrick Kuhn,
Tyler Hunt.
We are The Nerds You're Looking For. Take it easy, guys.
Later, guys.